Good morning, and welcome to the Alameda Connection on KCSM HD2. I'm your host, Scott Piehler. If you've ever enjoyed a good craft beer from Northern California, or even a glass of whiskey from the Golden State, odds are there's more than a little bit of Alameda in your glass. Why is that? Well, one of the principal ingredients in both beer and whiskey is malted barley, known commonly as malt. And where does that malt come from? Odds are it's from right here in Alameda at Admiral Maltings. Admiral Maltings is a traditional artisanal floor malting facility that provides their product to some of the finest names in beverages in California and beyond. I sat down with Ron Silberstein, who guided me on the journey from grain to glass, why floor malting matters, and why you should head out to Alameda Point and sit down and enjoy a glass and some grub at the Rake. The same passion that's present in so much farm-to-table dining these days is part and parcel of the culture of Admiral Maltings. Yes, it's organic. Yes, it's sustainable. But best of all, it tastes really, really good. Learn about the traditional craft of malting, the wonderful offerings at their pub, The Rake, how you can take a tour behind the scenes, and more with Ron Silberstein of Admiral Maltings on the Alameda Connection on KCSM HD2. Good morning, Ron, and welcome to the Alameda Connection.
How you doing today?
Doing all right. This is, and it's a theme here on the Alameda Connection, we try to find things, and I call them hidden gems. Admiral Maltings falls into that category because I cannot tell you the number of people, native Alamedans, who I say, Admiral Maltings, or I say the Rake at Admiral Maltings, and they go, what? Let's start with the very basics. What is Admiral Maltings?
That's a great question, and I think it's almost our most difficult goal is to simply convey what we are. I'll start by saying what we're not, because a lot of people think, oh, you have this pub, you're right next to Almanac, you're a brewery. And that's not it. Actually, what we do is we supply ingredients, the fundamental ingredient to make beer or whiskey. And we supply that to breweries and distilleries. So Almanac might use some of our malt in a beer, but we don't actually brew the beer. Malt to beer or to whiskey is what grapes are to wine or brandy. But with grain-based beverages, if you give me some barley and I grind it up and I add some water and I add some yeast and go, I'm going to ferment this into beer. Well, the most you'll get is bread.
Right.
And so what we do is we malt the grain so that it is fermentable.
Okay.
And it has the enzymes necessary to break down the sugars. And so Admiral Maltings makes malt, which is the fundamental ingredient for beer and whiskey. And we make that malt simply by soaking it, germinating it, and drying it. We follow Mother Nature. When a seed is about to grow a plant, it says, hey, all that energy in that seed, I need it. I want to grow. I want to grow a plant. And we go, great, let's go. Let's get started. And then we trick it. Right when it thinks it's going to start, that first leaf is about to come out from that little seed, we dry it out to stabilize it, stop the germination, and to give color and flavor to the malt. I had a professor once always used to say, malt is the potato, and hops are the salt on the potato.
Now, it's interesting because the process you describe sounds to the amateur here somewhat similar to we'll often read about bakeries advertising their sprouted grain bread.
Well, we've sprouted grain for Firebrand.
Okay.
Actually, and we're just getting that program off the ground. It's really fantastic. And so, yes, anytime that a seed is going to sprout, I mean, think of alfalfa sprouts, bean sprouts, whatever that's sprouted, it tends to be healthier. Why? Because the seed is starting to break itself down. It's enzymes are being used to break up proteins and starches and this sort of thing. And it creates all sorts of micronutrients. It becomes more digestible. It has different minerals and things that are broken down. So it's quite healthy. And sprouted wheat for bread, it would be the same thing as malted wheat for beer, except that the sprouted wheat is much less developed, much less sprouting going on than to actually make malt.
Now, you use a process called floor malting, and if folks have never seen this, it's literally done on the floor. What is floor malting? Why floor malting? And what is the alternative that you are the alternative to?
Fundamentally, floor malting is a traditional, artisanal way to make malt. It is the way it was probably done 10,000 years ago, or when, and when beer was first being brewed, or before that, actually. Once we soak the barley and it becomes hydrated. Barley is the preferred grain. We can malt other grains. We can malt corn, wheat, rye, oats. You can malt quinoa, or you can malt kernza is a new grain there. Floor malting takes that sprouted. I'm sorry, it's steeped in water until it does what we call chit. Now that's CHIT, no S in front of there. And chit is just the very, very first little end, the tiny white nub that starts to come out of the seed, that is the first visible sign, other than the swelling of it as it soaks in water, that it's germinating. So we soak it till it chits. We spread it on the floor where it's in a thin layer, about 4 inches thick. It'll grow maybe to 6 inches, and with all the hundreds of millions of other seeds that it's with on the floor, creates heat, and we have to keep the floor kind of cool. And so floor malting is that process where you're letting it germinate on the floor. Why? What's the difference? There's 2 other classic methods. One is called drum malting, and basically you have a single vessel that's used for steep soaking, germination, and drying, or the kiln. The other, probably most common industrial method, involves a pneumatic turning, or a mechanized turning of the grain in a bed. Imagine a huge box. It can be the size of a house almost, the floor print. Maybe it'll hold 250 tons. Maybe it'll hold 50 tons. Maybe it'll hold 100 tons. But the bottom line is you're forcing the germination a little more quickly. On the floor, it just is naturally germinating. Twice a day, we might turn it.
Okay.
That's what traditionally you would use a rake to do that, a rake and shovels, a special malt rake. That's why our pub is called the Rake, but it's a gentler process, and it takes about a day longer. The major malt companies that have historic roots in floor malting, and some of the universities that have done studies on this, there is a difference in flavor. There's both metabolomic differences, and so like the metabolites that are put off, the aromas, the flavors, but down on a molecular level, are absolutely positively different between the pneumatically, or let's say salad in box, that forcible aeration through the bed, and floor malted. And then when hedonic testing is done, when you actually just compare, this beer made identically, exactly same barley, grown in the same region, the same terroir, malted in the same cycle as far as slopes, all that. When people taste the exact same beer, hops, yeast, everything, people prefer the beer that was floor malted. It's not like a sledgehammer that hits you on the head, but it is an artisan method that is preferred by both consumers and the sophisticated brewers and distillers.
So it almost reminds me, I'm going to grossly oversimplify here for a moment, but if someone is a drinker of soft drinks, take a Mexican Coca-Cola, take an American Coca-Cola with HFCS, they're different.
Cane sugar versus high fructose corn syrup. One involves an industrial process, and the other is just, hey, this is grown in the field. I'm going to get some sugar out of this cane. And yeah, it is different. It's definitely different.
Now, your process has attracted a lot of customers. Your customer page is amazing. And some of them are some pretty heavy hitters. I mean, in addition to the breweries we have here on Alameda, there's Drake's and Russian River. So what is it that attracts these people to you?
Yeah, we get a really diverse group of customers. First of all, people are interested in traditional methods of doing things, and people are interested in traceability, and people are interested in Provence. And it's almost like, well, why would you get this peach from this particular farm, when you can just, go to the big bin in a commercial grocery store and pick out a peach. So that's really what we're trying to go against. When we first opened, there it was just started. There are fewer than, let's say, 100 craft maltsters. There's about 70 craft maltsters in the whole United States.
Okay.
At one point, there were over 9,000 breweries, and none of them, basically, until craft malt came around, were starting to use barley that was grown locally and malted locally. It was still a relic, really, of more industrial beer, where there were, 20 or fewer breweries in 1980, throughout the whole United States. Think of a vintner who makes wine, and you go, hey, what grape are you? What variety are you using in that wine you're making there? Like, I don't know, red, and that really was the level of knowledge that so many brewers had. So I think there's an interest. People want to know more. So we number one, we grow our barley here in California and other grains. Number two, we use farms that are at least interested in and utilize some sustainable farming method. We also are certified organic. So there's just, boom, that certification right there. Everyone understands that. No petrochemicals, no inorganic pesticides and fertilizers in there. But sustainable is, a little different. And it talks about things like using cover crops. Barley's a great cover crop, actually. It's talking about how you use intrusive methods to plow and till the soil that expose carbon to the air and release carbon and CO2 into the atmosphere, or do you do things that preserve the microbiome and the bacteria and the fungi that are naturally in the soil that promote growth and that store carbon in the soil? Because the soil can store more carbon than all the trees in the world. So crop rotation would be another fundamental aspect of sustainable farming. So one thing might be how it's farmed. The other thing might be it was farmed in California. The other aspect might be, the barley seed we developed was developed right here locally at our local agricultural land grant school, UC Davis, and they developed this great malting barley seed, and we've used some others from them. And then we floor malt. So that's another interesting thing. And we work with farmers that we can take people to the harvest and show them harvesting. And so people like this traceability. So all that combination of things, we can say no farmer, no barley, no barley, no malt, no beer, no fun. We wouldn't be here talking about Almanac and Admiral Maltings and all the others. So our customers, you asked about, why do the customers go in there? And I'm sorry I've taken so long to go back, but it's really about all these different attributes. Drake's is really, for example, they have changed their recipes in their flyaway pills, for example. Now we're like 50% of the malt that they use, which is phenomenal. Right. The Craft Maltsters Guild says if you use 10%, hey, you're our buddy. We'll certify you. And in a beer Bold Rush, which is a blonde ale, which they just got actually a gold medal at the World Beer Cup for, they use like about 30% of our malt. But those are really healthy. We love that. We are ridiculously more expensive than regular malt. So if people need to get, you use a little bit of us to get a lot of flavor and get their fermentable sugars from some other malts, well, that's okay. At least they're supporting their local farmer and their local maltster. So the flavor is there. People have success, and they might use 100%. You go to, or 90 some odd percent, or they might use 30, 40, 50%. And that's okay. It's just up to the brewery to decide. They're still supporting their local farmer.
It's interesting that you mentioned that Drake's did well with a blonde ale. I am old school craft beer drinker. I am not particularly a hophead. IPAs I appreciate, not my favorite, but I've always told people that I will judge a brewery by a blonde because there is nowhere to hide in that style.
There's a symbiotic relationship. There's a synthesis of malt and hops.
Right.
There's even these these things called thiols that have fruit-like flavors in both malt and hops, and perhaps that combination can create some very appealing, tasty, just synergies. I'll use that word again. Yes, we highly encourage. if our malt's also more expensive, one way to use it, inexpensive. Hops are much more expensive than our malt. And so just to make a 4.5%, a 3.8%, we have one brewery, Dunlow in Davis, is making Barbless Hook, and they're just doing 2.5%. But the flavor is there.
Now, to go even more subtle, one product that I have picked up, because the Rake has a couple of great refrigerators with an amazing can selection in addition to the draft. So Barrel Brothers.
Yeah.
They have their Dad Pants Lager or is a Pilsner, and they make a non-alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
It's delicious.
Yeah. I don't know if they use a vacuum distillation exactly, or what their method. That's one method of creating a non-alcoholic beer. Another method would be using a low-yielding yeast. In other words, a yeast that does not produce significant amounts of ethanol, so they can either keep it at around the 0.5%,
right,
or if it's a little higher, they can dilute it with, deoxygenated water to just lower that alcohol content. Our malt has been used in non-alcoholic beers. Kernza Golden, or actually now it's called Patagonia Golden, because Patagonia developed this. They wanted to promote this Kernza, very long root carbon sequestering perennial wheatgrass, basically. They made a non-alcoholic. We malted the rye that's in that.
And for anyone who is looking for a non-alcoholic alternative, you mentioned the Patagonia.
Deschutes brews it for Patagonia. So that Kernza Golden, that won a gold medal at, I forget if it was the GABF or the World Beer Cup, for non-alcoholic. And so, yes.
For anybody who's looking for a non-alcoholic alternative, that is literally, I think, one of the 5 best I've had. That is, and you can tell because it's often out of stock. People were talking and they're hearing, wow, this is a lot. I have to ask you one question about one thing on your resume, because people talk about technical school. Canadian Malting Barley Technical Center's Malt Academy.
Yeah.
That's a specific course of study.
It was very specific. At the time, it was probably the only one in North America.
I've always been amazed when going into the history of beer, because there are cultures who, if you're a man and you say you're a brewer, they look at you funny, because that's women's magic.
Absolutely. The women were, the keepers of the secret back there. Absolutely, positively. And, they're coming back. They're coming back. And it's great. There's a Pink Boots Society that's cool, amazing in promoting women in brewing. And then there's just a lot of great women brewers out there. 2017,
you opened up Admiral Malting. You and Mr. Davenport and Dave McLean.
And
right?
Dave McLean from Magnolia. And he and I, we were both brewers from way back, both instrumental in the startup of the San Francisco Brewers Guild back then, which is, there's a chapter anyhow. I think that's become the Bay Area Brewers Guild primarily. But he brought in containers of malt from England, and it was in particular from one farm, Brant Hill Farm, and he used to make a lot of milds and bitters and ESBs and cask conditioned ales and pale ales, more English style, and I just loved that. I was a big fan of English style beers myself, and so it only seemed natural when we were getting into it. And his connections and experience and his reputation in the craft beer community, and as a just a stellar brewer. So I was sort of the hub of the wheel. I mean, it was absolutely Dave, Curtis, and I, but I knew them both, and we kind of brought them together. And he's great. He just opened a new brewery brand. He's finding a permanent location, but it's called Hidden Splendor, and he's making some just great English styles, of course, from Admiral Malt. What else would he use? Standard Deviant's another just local gem, in that almost every beer they make, if not every beer, will have our malt in it.
I was actually up in Sebastopol. I was at a place in Sebastopol, and your banner was prominently displayed.
It might have been at Old Kaz. They love our. He's real fan, and one some in his Bukovany Pills, where again we're talking about his, like, he makes all sorts of hazies and West Coast IPAs, but what he wins the most awards for is this Bukovany Pills that he uses with our malt, and yeah, it's a phenomenal. He makes other beers with it now too.
It's almost like we're talking about one of my favorite subjects in food, which is there is, especially in Instagram influencer culture, there's food porn, and it becomes how much garbage can I throw into one dish? But to me, the pinnacle of a gourmet experience is you have the perfect ingredient prepared perfectly at the peak of freshness. You don't need to do much to a field-ripened tomato. So if you're starting with great ingredients, you don't need to get that complex.
Exactly, and you can mess it up. There's no doubt you can muck up good ingredients. You still need a great chef, a great brewer. But what you said about freshness is the one really, really important thing. I'm kicking myself that I forgot to mention. Is there is nothing like malt that's recently out of the kiln. In a commercial world, you can get 1, 2, 3-year-old malt, no problem. And that staleness is part of the profile. It's just like it evens out the taste. You don't notice if you're getting a fresh batch or a non-fresh batch. It's muted. It's consistent. This is the larger malting companies are going to be blending varieties. We'll use one variety only. They'll be blending regions. It could be from farms off, vast distances. They blend protein content. So we select for really quality barley, and we do that right away.
If people are wondering what this looks like, you have a tour that you do. Is it still Sundays at 3?
We do a free tour every Sunday. It's so fun. Bring your kids, bring your partner, your friend, or whatever. Even if you don't drink beer, it's fascinating to see such a simple agriculturally based process. It's a free tour. It's at the Rake. The Rake is just epic as a showcase for malted beer. How it's made. You can sit in the pub and look through the windows and see people on the floor. You can see it growing. You can see our equipment, to just tasting all that. We have 20 different beers on tap, all made by craft brewers, mostly in California. There's 99.9% California, but all those beers are there at the Rake that you can try. So you do a tour, you see how malt is made, and then you taste all these different products made with what you just saw. I have brewers tell me all the time, and I know this isn't very humble, but it's just what people are telling me.
It ain't bragging if you can back it up.
Exactly. That it's the best beer joint they could ever possibly, the freshest, most interesting, wide-ranging class of beers, that brewers put their best foot forward with.
And for those who, you may not be beer drinkers, we talked about whiskey, which is a great selection of whiskeys there, but you also stock things that may not necessarily be part of your ecosystem, but you have some wonderful wines. Kudos for stocking Gallon cider from up in NorCal, because that is some of the best cider that's out there.
I agree.
Great non-alcoholic things as well. Who decides the taps?
Well, we work on that. It's sort of a joint effort. In other words, as I mentioned before, I'm the chief malt hustler at Admiral Maltings. So I'm dealing with breweries all the time. So I know what people are brewing, and I communicate to my general manager, Greg, and he is ultimately responsible for the tap list. Just yesterday, there's a fairly large brewer called Farmers Brewing, and he grows his own wheat. We malt that wheat for him. And so I was just asking, okay, which beers exactly have the wheat in it, and what percentage of the wheat is in each beer and all that, just to make sure it's something we want to highlight. And so we're communicating back and forth all the time about what's being brewed, who's putting our malt in it, and all that. And the same with the whiskey producers. You will find no better selection of American single malt whiskeys that you can drink, because every single whiskey there is made from our malt. There's wheat whiskeys, there's bourbon whiskeys, there's rye whiskeys, there's single malt. In other words, 100% malted barley. That is the new, since January, official regulatory definition that now we can claim our own classification, just as Scotland or Ireland, as far as what is a Canadian malt whiskey. And for an American malt whiskey, it's going to be 100% malted barley made by one distillery, and that has to be in oak at some point.
Well, I'm going to pick up on one name you mentioned, Greg, your general manager. And this is, I was not paid for the following announcement, folks. Greg helped me organize my wife's birthday party this year at the Rake, and we had a blast.
It's a chill space. We have incredible outdoor space.
I lived in Georgia for 30 years, and until I found the Rake, I was dying for decent pulled pork in Alameda. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we like to smoke a few minutes of chicken, some pork, and things like that, and make really good sandwiches. We have a grilled cheese with membrillo or quince preserve that's out of this world. Good salads, good grilled. Right now for the seasonal one, a grilled cauliflower. Thank you for that. I think it's really solid pub fare, very fresh. We make it right there.
And my dog Eliza applauds your choice of dog treats.
Dog friendly. Bring your dog. We got dog bowls, dog treats, plenty of room outside. Kids too. We totally welcome that.
Why did it wind up in Alameda?
Well, that's it. I'm here, so I didn't want a big commute, and why give San Francisco the glory or Oakland? And actually, when I met the developer Joe Ernst, another local Alameda guy, he developed the building next door where Firebrand is, and I was just like, Joe, you should get this. It's so beautiful. It's a dry goods warehouse that was built in 1944 by the U.S. Navy, and it's like a redwood cathedral in there, but it needed so much work. And I called Almanac, and they were very interested, and that's how they're there. So yeah, it's kind of fun. And so I thought, boy, a brewery next to a malting facility, I mean, that's historic. There's very few locations like that.
So one final question, because this show, we address the greater Bay Area. So someone's not in Alameda, they think, I want to go across the bay. Why should they come?
Number one, you can take a ferry here, and it's one of the most beautiful things, tourists, non-tourists, local, anyone could do to cross the bay in a ferry. But why should they come is they will not find a higher end, fresher repertoire of beers that are very lager-centric, so very focused on lighter styles and just elegant taste profiles. It's child-friendly. I mean, we're at Spirits Alley, too, so you have St. George Distillery there, you have Faction Brewing, you have Almanac Brewing, you have another winery, Building 49, you have Alameda Island Brewery. They focus one of their beers on Admiral. It's called Let It Lager, so it's their lightest, nicest lager. That's 100% Admiral Malt.
That is a spectacular beer. By the way, if anyone in the audience is a lager fan, that is one of the best lagers I've had.
It's awesome. I've had German people say that.
Ron Silberstein, the head malt hustler. Chief. I'm sorry. We'll get that correct. The chief malt hustler at
Gotta
Admiral
have
Maltings.
something high in my title. Call me Chief.
Thank you so much for spending time with us here on the Alameda Connection.
It's been my pleasure, Scott. This has been great. You take care now.
You too. Thanks again to Ron Silberstein of Admiral Maltings for spending time with us here on the Alameda Connection. If you'd like to check out Admiral Maltings, either for the behind-the-scenes tour or to take in a meal at the Rake, they are at 651A West Tower Avenue. That's out on Alameda Point, right in between Almanac Brewing and the Firebrand Bakery Cafe. You can find them online at admiralmaltings.com. Once again, you and your family are invited to take their behind-the-scenes tour, completely free, suitable for all ages, and that happens every Sunday at 3 p.m. Coming up next Sunday on the Alameda Connection, we're going to get into the spirit of the season. The spooky season, that is. My guest will be Patty Carey, the woman behind Alameda Haunts. To those of you in the greater Bay Area, I say if you've never experienced Halloween in Alameda, you've never experienced Halloween at all. For 20 years, Alameda Haunts has been the force behind events like a kitty costume parade, Halloween decorating contest, and even a contest to find out who can make the best spooky cocktail. And best of all, everything they do benefits the Alameda Food Bank. That's next Sunday at 8 a.m. on KCSM HD2. Don't forget to head on over to chrsradio.com/KCSMDOC and get your tickets for the November 1st showing of the KCSM 60th Anniversary documentary film. If you have an idea for an upcoming show topic, feel free to email me alamedaconnection@gmail.com. Thanks to the California Historical Radio Society for our interview space, and thanks as always to Bill Hart for our theme music, Beachside Isle, from his album Watch the Sky. I'm Scott Piehler. See you next Sunday on KCSM HD2 for the Alameda Connection.